Hi, Shalom, double honors to the apostles of GMS and honest you brothers that be pushing this truth in sincerity. This is going to be a video following the recent upload I uploaded, namely Vladimir Putin's speech. The bear won't ask anyone for permission, and this is pertaining to a comment that I recently received, and it's by a lady. I'm assuming it's a woman, but a woman by the name of Rebecca Tillman. Right? And it says, if you pay attention to what this guy is really saying, according to him and the Bible, Russia, Greece, and Iran are the beasts, which is not exactly what I said. If you watch the video over, we're gonna get into that, but just to clarify, the beast, right, is NATO, right? And we can see it in the image here, and you can see it in the original video, in the original post, clearly referred to this image as being the beast having 7 heads and 10 horns. But there's certain points I didn't touch on with enough delicacy, because you got some intricacies within the scriptures, and it's I feel it'll be worth making. It's worth sitting down and going through the study and making a video on some of the intricacies, especially that I found within myself, that certain instances and passages maybe I whizzed over, but by clarifying both to myself in the past couple of minutes before, in terms of preparation for this video, certainly certain things have certainly some aspects, or rather more some facets of the recent video that I originally posted would require more attention than I first put in. Right, so she says, I don't. She goes on to say, I don't doubt there is a bad part. I don't doubt there are bad parts of every nation, and we know the unholy Roman Church, which she's correct in now, give her props for that, is heavily infested with the U.S. Right, but you need to understand these people are working all for the same team. That's why I keep on referring back to this image. It's all for the same team. That's all one goal. The unholy Roman Empire and the Americans are all one team, right? And it's not the Americans leading the Romans or the Romans leading the Americans. It's the people above them, which are the so-called elite banking families, right? That really are calling the shots, right? They're the ones that set up NATO. They're the ones that set up America. And if you don't believe me that they're the ones that set up America, you can go through America's finances. And in fact, it'll be worth, I guess it will be worth sharing. No, I might do that in another video, but certainly if you go through the American history, you find out that the elite banking families, by way of the presidents, have slowly but surely worked their way into that particular government, man. And by their so-called central government, their so-called central bank, through the central banking system, they've basically got ownership of the Americans. Because if you understand anything about finance and how currency works, then essentially you find out. Well, I guess I'm going to go into it. Then you find out how currency comes into play. The person in charge of the government writes what's known as words are slipping me right now, but essentially he writes a list of things that he wants to do. So he's going to spend some of that money, and they call it deficit spending because there's nothing actually in the bank. Send that off to the treasury, and it's called a bond, I believe. Right, and the bond then goes off to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve then sells that bond by way, rather more, the treasury sells that bond to the elite bankers. Right, and this is how the elite bankers come into play. Right, then that bond gets sold to the Federal Reserve, which the Federal Reserve is nothing federal about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is owned by private bankers, which are the same elite banking families, mind you. Right, and once the Federal Reserve has that particular a bond within them, which they pay off from an account that has nothing within that. Right, once that's been paid off to the elite banking families, they then sell part of that. I believe they sell part of that bond back to the bankers, right? And that's how currency comes into play, right? So as you can see, man, them elite banking families are all the way throughout that whole chain, man, right? And they own all of the interest on all of the debt that's been accumulated within the American financial system, right? And within really all the global financial system is owned by the elite banking families. That's why they say all wars are bankers' wars. Now going back to the point I was making, that America is really owned by the elite banking families, right? If you go to see all of the presidents that was against the so-called central banking system, right? They all got assassinated, right? Now I did put up a video recently about this, and you know, YouTube being YouTube, it didn't quite save, and I didn't get the opportunity to save the video, so it might be worth doing the video again, going a little bit deeper than I did there. But like I was referring to the point that she made, right? The unholy Roman Empire and the American government are the same people, man. Right? They're all part of that same ideology, right? When you go into the book of Revelations, the 17th chapter, it says, and Revelations 18th chapter, where it talks about the whore, right? Pouring the wrath of fornications to all the people. What's part of that fornication is that democracy, you can see on the far right here. Keep on referring to this image, because although it's an image amongst us as GMS that we've seen over and over again, right? It's one that you can really pass your eye at, and some of the points, some of the intricacies within that, right? I personally hadn't really got into them. That's why I made the original video, and also this video here, and some of those philosophies, like I was saying, that America pours out to the whole world, because America is really the ones that sit on top of NATO, man. America is really that you got all kind of nations within NATO, but who's really in control, right? It's the Americans. That's why the depiction over here and the depiction seen in the vision in Revelations the 17th chapter is America sitting on the hook, and what they're perpetuating within that glass of America juice, for lack of a better term, right, is that democracy, the religion, with which, you know, this lady correctly mentioned, right, the unholy Roman Empire, of which there's, you know, not unholy Roman Empire, sorry, words slipping me, Roman Catholicism, right, which we've got over here, which is that religion that they have, the idolatry, the homosexuality, right, the lies, the adultery, and the covetousness, and the murderers, right. So going back to the quote that this lady put up, so yeah, you are right in a sense, but not really, right? And we read on further, and it says the U.S. has more Protestant and Messianic believers than any other country with the world. But this is not about religion, man, right? I didn't put up the original video concerning religion, man. This is about the 12 tribes of Israel. This was for the elect. This was for the Negroes, Hispanics, Native Americans that receive it. This really wasn't for you. Whether, you know, I don't know whether this person was an Israelite or not, right? But really, for the most part, is you know, for the statistics of it is gonna be, this is just gonna be another scoffer, man, right? Statistically speaking, it's gonna be just another scoffer. But you know, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt on this initial response. Right, it says the U.S. has more Protestants and Messianic Jewish believers than any other country in the world, and even more so since the beast system, Rome, which that's kind of half and half, because when you like I've showed you, the beast is really these seven nations which make up these 7 nations, right, and you have the 10 horns. Right, so you got the 7 major nations: Germania Major, Romans, the French, the Spanish, Germania Minor, British, and Greeks, right? And then you got the 10 economic powers, right? And I went through this before. The 10 economic powers: Belgium, Denmark, right? France, right? Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Greece, Spain and Portugal, England and Ireland, and West Germany, right? So we done went through all of this, right? But referring back to the point I was making, right, concerning the beast system. The beast system is not really Rome, man. The beast system is actually NATO, right? Because NATO, when we go and see it in the scriptures, then NATO is referring to the dragon, right? Which in essence is actually the same people. It's actually talking about the same thing, right? But it's just a different time period, man. right? So now we're in the age of 2014. It's known as NATO, man. They known as the beast, right? But back in the Roman times, it was known as the dragon, man, right? But we're gonna see that in the scriptures, right? But it's all the same people. It's the same Edomites governing themselves in the same way, right? Because it was when we go into the book of Daniel, the second chapter, it was a beast. If I believe it's Daniel, the second chapter, it was as a beast. Diverse, rather more Daniel the seventh chapter, diverse from the other beasts. Because you had because in the time of the Persians, right? From the time of the Persians, you had this goes into something else. But from the time of the Babylonians, you had dictators, right? You had dictators within the Persians, and you had dictators within Grecia, namely you had Darius and Cyrus. You had rather more. If we start from the top, you had Nebuchadnezzar, right, in Babylon, right. You had Darius and all of that in the Medo Persian Empire. You had Alexandra, right, the so-called great, within the Greeks. But the Roman Empire was different because they had all of these so-called leaders and all of that, but the way they governed themselves was diverse from the other way. It was different from the other kingdoms because they said pretty much their kingdom was the people's kingdom, so you can understand, right? And that's the same thing you have right now, that democracy, that so-called democracy. And I say so-called democracy because it's not really democracy. It's the illusion of democracy. Because when you understand taking the North American the North American Negroes for an example, and how they were so-called emancipated, right? The word emancipation goes to it literally means transfer. Them slaves were transferred from private ownership to corporate ownership, man. Right? It was just transferred from like a private, like a when a company goes from private to public, they became public slaves, man. Right, with the illusion of freedom, and that's what you people are. You're a public slave. You're public slaves. You're not private slaves, right? To where you're subject unto a man, and the man can do whatever he wants to do with you, right? No, you're more public slave, and the government can do whatever they want to do with you, right? So that's how the Roman government was slightly different from other kingdoms before, because they eluded the people to believing that they had the power, and really the leaders and the so-called dictators weren't really in power. But that was all an illusion. That's how the same way the Americans conduct themselves. They give you the illusion of power, right? And when I say the Americans, you got to remember these people above the so-called, there's people that pull Obama strings, man, which are them elite banking families. They're the ones that are really in control of the show right now, right? And they're the ones that are going to decide when they're going to go make war with them Russians, man, right? That they're the ones that are going to be pretty much. I mean, they've been going for it, but they're the ones that are going to be the main instigators of when that war begins. Obviously, they haven't got full control of everything. There's going to be a monkey wrench within, if so you can understand. So it goes on to say, right. So since the beast system, which is Rome, like I've pointed out to you, the beast is actually NATO, right? The whole beast system is them 7 heads and them 10 horns, with America sitting on top of that. It's that whole NATO, and NATO as well, right? The leader of NATO, if I remember my information correctly, right? The leader, it's not the leader of NATO. No, it's pretty much who's in control of NATO is the Americans. But whenever you see NATO go into a country, you see American foot soldiers on the ground, man. Right? NATO is not NATO is not really like a world encompassing a nation encompassing organization, man. That's really about the agenda that the Americans have, man. So when Obama wants to go into a country, he can go into the country under the guise of NATO, or under the guise of the Americans themselves. And sometimes he goes in there as charitable groups like the Red Cross. So you had this thing with the Ebola thing, right? And they went up into them Western African countries under the guise of the Red Cross. And when them Western African countries saw that the people were getting ill and the people were getting sick, right? They kicked them out of the country because it was them Americans, right, going back to the center of disease control, controlling the disease within Africa, right? It says the beast, and she goes on to say, the beast slaughters Christians, and who is killing Christians now, who is behind the killing of the U.S., who is behind the killing of Christians, and who has always been killing Christians. The U.S. is most likely nation God will save, and Europe, Union, or even London, right? Let me read again. It says the U.S. is the most likely nation God will save, and the U.S. is by and large. I'm saving myself. It says the U.S. is the most likely nation God will save, and the U.S. is by and large Israel, both faith and by bloodliness, right? So she's basically, she's basically saying, man, right? The Most High is gonna have it when He comes back. He's gonna save them Americans, man. You're gonna be sadly mistaken, because that whole chapter in Revelations, the 18th chapter, is talking about America, man, right? Which is that whore. Right, America's that whore that sitteth on top of the beast. Right, let me go back to the image. That's the whore that sits on top of the image, man, and on top of the beast, man. And this is all really, this is not like a beast that's actually gonna come and live, man. Right? Don't get simple. This is actually like it says here. It's referring to people, but we're gonna get into that when I get into the scriptural side of things. All right, when we get into the scripts. When we get into the word, right? It says, we are those who will not worship Rome, right? Really, the whole world is under the vibration of NATO, man. The worship of the beast is under this, man. Underneath this whole, man. Because America perpetuates all of the philosophies here, right? With this, which this beast is all about, man. Right? Namely, the democracy, right? All over the world now, you're seeing people coming, so-called protesting and all of that because they want rights and all of that. You see it within Chinese countries, right? You see the religion, right? Whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam and all of that, right? Well, like I said, man, like I just mentioned, Christianity, which is she's referring to, man. That whole Christianity thing is part of the beast, man. That's all part of the beast system, man. That's part of what they're pushing. Right? The idolatry, the homosexuality, the lies, the covetousness, and murder. See, we here at GMS, we don't follow that Christianity madness, man. We're about the scriptures, man. We're about the elect, right? Namely, the 12 tribes of Israel and the elect within the 12 tribes of Israel. The 1/3, as pertaining to Zechariah the 13th chapter and the 8th verse, Romans the 11th chapter and the 7th verse. Right? When you go to the book of Hebrews, the 8th chapter and the 8th verse, where he talks about the new covenant the Most High is going to make, he's going to make that with Israel, man. He ain't going to make that with all of the world, man. He's going to make that with the remnant of the real Israelites, which are the Negroes, Hispanics, Native Americans. So you said Jewish people, ish, it pertains, the word ish, the suffix ish at the end of the word pertains to not being the original thing, man. Right? Jewish means they're not Jews, man. Blackish means it's not black. Right? Them Jews out there are in the land of Israel right now are not the real Jews, man. Right? But that's a whole nother lesson. Right? That's a whole nother lesson for a whole nother day. Right? It says, we are those who will not worship Rome, Russia, Iran, Greece. Right? It says, who sent the lamb as our sacrifice. Sorry, I'm missing something there. It says European Union or even London. We are our own people, and we are free people, and we worship the Holy One of Israel, who sent the lamb as sacrifice, and we will be remnant. We will be the remnant, the Most High saved. So you can see there. There's certain aspects. I'm gonna read just that top line that really concerns me right here. It says the U.S. is the most likely nation God will save. Right, Salakia. Right, get rid of that. Here we go. Right, it says the U.S. is most likely nation God will save. That's completely incorrect. Right, God will save, and the European Union, right, which you're talking about the beast. That's actually the beast, man. Right, the European Union and or even London. That's all the beast. And it says we are our own people and we are free people. You're not even free from your own government, man. You're subject unto the elite banking families. And like I said, I'm gonna have to make another video on that financial system, man, because you people have it to where you believe you're actually free, man. You're not free, right? From the time you're born, you're subject unto your debt, man. Right? The money that you have the money that you have acquired and the money that you have in your pockets comes by way of deficit spending, man. Right? They take out trillions and trillions of pounds, right? They borrow that from they borrow that from the Federal Reserve, which borrows that from elite banking families, and the elite banking families want that money back with some interest. And who's gonna pay for that money back? Well, a loan is paid back in the future, man. So the future, your children's children is gonna pay off that debt, man. Right? And what does that mean? That means to say that really your children are subject unto them elite banking families, man. They're slaves unto them because they're gonna pay that money back, man. Right? Does not the scriptures say, right? That the borrower is subject unto the lender of usury, right? Something to that effect, right? That just means you're slaves unto them, man. Right? It says we are those who will not worship beasts, the worship Rome. Right? The worship, there's no such thing as the worship of Rome. Rome really is the epicenter of the religious facet within the beast. Right? I'm gonna say it again. Rome is the epicenter of the religious facet within the beast. Right? The religion is just one thing, man. Right? You got the war side of that. We see murderers at the bottom there, and who's the perpetuator of that? That's America. Right, you've got the homosexuality. That's America again. So you can see America's, is responsible for a lot of things, man. And America's gonna be destroyed for that. But that's in the book of Revelations, the 18th chapter. Right, you can read all of that, and it says, like it says, come out of her, my people. Right, because she is polluted by what? Right, but I have religion that comes by way of the Roman, by way of that Roman Catholicism. Right, that idolatry, the homosexuality, lies, adultery, and all of that, covetousness and murder, man. And it goes on, man. Right? It says, and she goes on to say, she goes on, and that's pretty much it. I wanted to touch on that, but now here's what gets a little bit tricky, because the right place to start, because these scriptures, they're not chronological, like I always say, man. Right? It's different things happen at different times, especially with the prophecies, right? It's prophecy, but that prophecy is even taking place at different times. Nevertheless, I shall start in the book of Revelations, the 13th chapter. Let me find the window. Revelations, the 13th chapter, on the first verse. Pretty much the same precept I use in the same way, but I want to touch on certain facets so you can really get the meat out of that, right? Right, so you can really get the juice out of that. So this is the book of Revelations, 13th chapter, on the first verse. It says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast arise out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of blasphemy. So the key words to bear in mind for the time being is the word sea there. That's referring to people. Right, it's not referring to the actual sea. We're going to see that in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, and on down, right? And it says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Now, when we read the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, you're going to find out that leopard is talking about the Grecians, the Greeks, because they was the vision that Daniel saw, right? When the Greeks came into power, that's what that represents. Because they were it was pretty much the so-called third superpower that came into power. You had the lion, the bear, and the leopard, right? And then you had the great meat grinder, which was a beast with the iron teeth, and that was indicative of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, notice there's no fifth empire, right? There's no fifth empire, but we're in a kind of a fifth empire right now, right? That's why the scripture refers to it as the dragon and the beast, so you can understand. Right, but really, it's talking when you go into the book of Daniel, back in the book of Daniel, that it's really talking about the same people, because these are the same Edomites, man. Right? The Babylonians were different, a different nation to the Persians, which were different nations to the Greeks. But the Greeks and the Romans are all the same Edomites, man. Right? And the Greeks and the Romans are the same as the Americans. And that's why they go about doing exactly the same thing as the Greeks and the Romans did. Right? And Rome is more like America than most people understand. Right? The democracy is exactly the same. Right? It's all about the people when it's really not about the people. The way they spend their money and get into the deficit spending, the way they are devaluing the currency and all of that, goes back to Rome. That's why the scripture says, like, I require of you of the former times, man. Because when you read and you understand the former times and what's happened in the past before, that's when you can really understand the future. Right? And we read it again. It says, and the beast, which is the Revelations 13 chapter, and the second verse, it says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, right, referring to the Greeks, as we go see, and his feet were like unto was as the feet of a bear, right, and his mouth the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Right. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to refer to Daniel the 7th chapter. Pretty much last, right? I'll get onto the fact. I'll touch on the fact that the dragon is talking about Rome, right? And the dragon and the beast are the same people, right? And we're gonna prove that the beast is the first part of the beast, essentially the beast which was like unto a leopard. That's referring to the Greeks. We're going to see that in Daniel the 7th chapter. So going backwards now to the book of Daniel the 7th, not Daniel, rather more Revelations 12th chapter, which I've got in one of these windows out here somewhere, right? This is Revelations the 12th chapter, and I'm going to start from the first verse on down, because the whole thing is good, right? It says, Revelations 12:1, it says, and there appeared a great wonder, right, in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And that 12 stars is indicative of the 12 tribes of Israel. So this woman is talking about Israel. It's not actually a woman in the sky, right? For you simple ones out there, it's actually just a vision, man. It says, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And who was that child? It's talking about Yahushua. Talking about the Lord, right, who was going to be the Savior of Israel. It says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. Wait a minute, didn't it just say the same thing here in Revelations the 13th chapter? Right, if we go to Revelations the 13th chapter on the screen, right, didn't it just say the same thing here? Right, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his head were 10 crowns. So what, is he seeing the same thing here, or is it a different thing? Right, it's talking about the same people coming back in kind of a different time period, man. Right? Because here, the beast here is talking about right now, the present day, right? Although it was still in the future so this was still in the future for John, but this here in Revelations the 12th chapter, right? That had already happened, man. Well, rather more, that had already happened, right? This has already happened, because the Romans were already in power here, man. Right? So here we're in a time of the dragon coming into power, and we're gonna see that even better clarified. Now this is what proves. Now this is talking about the Romans. It says, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. Like I said, that's the same thing that it says in Revelation, the 13th chapter. And it says, and there appeared another wonder, and behold, the 4th chapter, and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them down to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Didn't the Romans, man, didn't they go out? I can't remember what exactly the name of the Caesar that was in power at the time. Didn't he basically kill all of the children that was supposed to be of the same of the same age as the Lord when he came on the scene, man. Right? That's why it says here, and she brought forth a man child. Rathermore, it says, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Right? That's talking about them Romans, man. It says, and the child, and she should, it says, and she brought forth a man child, which was Jesus or Yahusha, right? And rathermore, not you or, right? So you can understand, right? If you don't know the name of the Lord, right? So you can understand Jesus, but really his name is Yahusha. And it says, and she brought forth a man child, right, who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and the child was caught up unto the Most High, right, to his throne, right. So that proves to you that that's talking about the Messiah, right, Yahusha, right, and that proves to you for the point here in the fourth chapter, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. That's talking about the Romans, because the Romans actually did that. This is actually a historical account. So when he was saying this was talking about the Romans when they came into power, right, just before his time, right. And when we go into Revelations, the 13th chapter, still the same, pretty much the same, beast, right, having 7 heads and 10 horns, but this time it's referred to as the beast. And here in the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter, is referred to as the dragon, man, right. And we read on. It says, and the woman fled into the wilderness, right, where she hath a future prepared unto her, the Most High, that they should feed her there 1,062 days. And that's talking about when we went into the diaspora, when we was dispersed amongst the heathen. Now this jumps. Now this is talking about after his time. This is talking about after John's time, right? So all of this happened before his time, so you can get the history, right? But after this point where he talks about in the 7th chapter, right? And it's talking about in the future, right? Because when you read it, it says, and the dragon saw in the 7th chapter, and there was war. Sorry, you can't see the 7th chapter. It says, and there was war in heaven, right? And Michael and his angel fought against the dragon. The dragon fought his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was any place found in heaven. Neither was there place found anymore in heaven. So they was taken down from that highly place that they have right now. So even here it's referring to the beast as the dragon, man. So it's indicative they're the same people, man. They're the same people. Right? Now let me see if I can get some more meat out of this bit. But I feel like pretty much the point has been made. Right? You can easily see. Right? You can easily see that that the dragon here is talking about the Roman Empire, right? Especially from this precept here, in the 4th verse, where it talks about for to devour the child as soon as it was born, because that's the actual account. You can read that in the history. There was actually an account of young babies being killed, right, by them Romans, man. Right, around the time, because they predicted that the Lord was going to come on the scene. So if these Romans were able to predict that the Lord was going to come on the scene, how comes, touching on another subject, how comes you Israelites out there don't believe Yahusha exists, man? Alright, see how crazy that is? Right, now this is going to be back in the going backwards again this time. It's going to be in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, top on down. Alright, this is Daniel 7:1. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a vision of his head upon his bed, and he wrote the dream, and he told the sum of the matters. And Daniel spake and said, I saw in the night vision, behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the sea. Right, and it says, and 4 beasts came from the sea, diverse from one another. And it says the first was like unto right, and you notice you got that same word sea over there, right, which just means people, because when you go to the breakdown, as we're going to see a little bit later on within the scriptures, right, these beasts is just great, it's just kings, man. Right, it says, and Daniel spake and said, I saw in the night vision, and behold, 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came out of the sea, diverse from one another. First was like unto a lion, right, with a lion, and had wings, and behold, until the wings were plucked out, and it was lifted up from the earth, and stood upon feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it was raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, and between its teeth. And they had said unto it, Arise and devour much flesh. Right? And it goes on to say, and another and I beheld another beast, a second like rather more seen that. And it says this is the 6th verse. And it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon his back of it 4 wings of a fowl, right? And the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And that's talking about the Greeks, right? Because you had the Babylonians, the Persians, then the Greeks, right? And the Greeks here refer to the leopard, just like what it says here in the book of Revelations, Revelations the 13th chapter, right? I might close it down, but it refers to them. It says, I'll read it out. Let me get it back up. Revelations the 13th chapter. 13. Right? Revelations the 13th chapter, and it says, and I stood upon the sea, and I saw another beast, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his head were 10 crowns, and upon his head. And we go to the point, jump to the point, it says, and the beast was like unto a leopard, and his feet was like unto a bear. So when they came in, when these Edomites came in, they was referred to as the leopard. But how are they gonna leave, man? They gonna leave by him, man. They gonna leave by way of him. That's how they gonna go out, man. That's gonna be like almost like the end of the Edomites, man. He's the other end of the Edomites. He's on the other spectrum of the Edomites, so you can understand. He's gonna be the end of the Edomites. That's why the feet is the last thing you see, man. So the last thing of these Edomites gonna see is gonna be Vladimir Putin, man. He's gonna be the instigator of World War III, man. Right? And he even the point of the video prior to this one was to point that fact out, man, so you can to better clarify that. Right? So we carry on in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Right? And really, I think every point's been hit. Right, and it's after this I saw in the night vision, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and they stamped the registry with its feet, and it was diverse from all the beasts. Right, so all of these different kingdoms before had a king and a dictator, but this one was all about the people. That's how it was diverse from the other ones. Right, and it had 10 horns. Right. Now let me jump to the next point that I want to pull out of this. Is going to be in the 18th verse. Right. So after all of this has been said and done, man, what's going to be the resolution of that? This is Daniel 7:18. It says, "But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom." So we're gonna take it, right, and possess the kingdom forever, right, and ever, right. So who are the saints? Pursuant to Psalm 50th chapter and the 5th verse, Psalm 50 and 5, right. Them that have made sacrifice unto the Most High by blood. So you can see it right there, man. It's clear as daylight, man. The beast and the dragon is pretty much the same people, but the beast is what we're living under right now, under the guise of the EU and NATO, right? But the dragon, right, was really the Roman Empire, right? And really the whole of the Edomites can be divided into really 3 sections. If you had a timeline, on the left hand side you would have the Greeks, which was the leopard, then you would have had the Romans, which is the dragon, and then you would have had the Americans as the beast. All the same people, man, the same thing, right? The same machine, so you can understand, right? It's all the same machine, right? Like I said, I'm gonna say it again. You would have on the left hand side, you would have a leopard, right? And really, let me add a fourth element to that, right? On the left hand side, you have the leopard, which was the Greeks, and then the Greeks later became known as the Romans, which is known in the scriptures as the dragon, right? And the Romans came out of power, right? Their power decreased, and it was chased into what the scripture refers to as the bottomless pit, because it was void of natural resources, which is the Europe, right? And then they later came into power, right, under the guise of the Germans, the Romans, the French, the Spanish, the Germans again, the British, the Greeks, right, and Belgium and Denmark, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands and Greece, and so on and so forth. They later came back as that, and that element of it is known as the beast, and the latter end of the beast is pretty much is the feet, man, the bear, which is gonna be them Russians, man. And the Russians, right, although they're the same people, right, they're not the same. They haven't got the same agenda. That's why you got stuff like this, man. What would the U.S. do? What would a U.S.-Russia war look like, right? And you got other stuff like this, man. Can NATO face up to Russia task, right? And you have it there. NATO is on the other facet. He's on the opposite end, right, of Russia, right? So just to sum it up, you had the leopard, right, which was the Greeks. Then later became the dragon, which is the Romans, which later became known as the beast, rather more, which is NATO, and with America encompassed in there, right? But America is almost like a separate entity that is in control of NATO, right? And then you have the whole house, because the house is divided, man, right? You have the whole house with them Russians coming up against them, which is known as the bear in the scriptures, the bear's feet, namely in Revelations 13th chapter, right? So that was a bit of a long-winded one, but Lord's willing was edifying to the brothers, right? And whether it was edifying